Okay, welcome everybody. It is 5 minutes past. I'm a little late because I had to finish the latest episode. Life has been a little weird, and so normally, I might have watched last night, but this time I had to wait a little bit. So I'm all caught up. Just watched episode 6. I think it's called Udun. Which okay, interesting title. Anyway, but I thought, all right, I was gonna do something else for the live stream, and eventually I was just like, "Why? We need to look Rings of Power." Anyway, it's been we talked about the first 2 episodes, but then nothing really since then, so I figured now would be a pretty good time to get into it. Um, I do think I probably ought to, well, first of all, I need more light in here. Can yeah, how's that? That's a little better. That's a little more light. Let's see, we need a different color. What should we do? Should we do like a gold, a green, a blue? What do we think? It doesn't matter. How about we go with it probably doesn't matter all that much. Yeah, hot pink. That's me. All right, we'll go hot pink. Okay, Rings of Power, 6 episodes in. I've got some thoughts. I'm sure you have thoughts. I want to hear your thoughts. I'm actually I'm excited to hear your thoughts. And I know a lot of you are in Discord, like right now, probably still typing up responses in Discord. You should copy and paste those here so that we can address questions, concerns, joys, frustrations, all the all the good stuff with Rings of Power. Um, oh boy! All right, excellent. So we got a complicated question coming up from Josh. In the meantime, while that complicated question is coming, I will say this. Um, I have, as you guys know, I've been very uh, charitable, pre-charitable, right? The show is coming up, and I was, kind of, I was out there saying, "Hey, look, let's give the show a chance. It might be terrible, but hey, it might be really great. Who knows? Let's not prejudge all that stuff. And give it the benefit of the doubt. Give it a shot. All those things." Um, I'm still kind of I'm still there for the most part. Um, there's a lot. I think 6 episodes in, there's a lot to cheer for. A lot of stuff that I've really enjoyed about the show so far. Um, and a lot of little frustrations here and there. Things that come up that kind of from a lore perspective or whatever, things, they'll make me roll my eyes a bit. And, that's fine. It's really, it's not that big a deal. Right up until last week. So episode 5 um, brought something about that really uh, it frustrated me in at least 2 ways. One was on the lore side of things, but then it also frustrated me on the just in a storytelling way. Kind of frustrated me. So anyway, we'll get there. Um, I don't know. Spoilers. Yeah, well, yeah, we're probably gonna have some spoilers here. How much spoilers for the last episode? We'll talk about this week's episode. I'll leave it for a little while. So if you want to hang out, we'll talk. I think there will be a lot to talk about with episode 5. So last week's episode, there will be a lot to talk about with that, and maybe we kind of s- stick with that for a little while. And so if you aren't quite caught up with this week, hopefully people in the chat won't be ruining things. The thing is, I'm not sure that there's much to ruin in episode 6. Like there's not like a, I guess this is something of a spoiler, but like there's not some huge thing to spoil. It's just, it's an eventful episode. It's probably the most eventful episode so far, but the events um are pretty straightforward, right? Battle scene and that sort of thing. So point being, I guess if I were you, I wouldn't worry too much about spoilers for episode 6, but if you're extremely sensitive to spoilers, then yeah, we will eventually talk about it. Okay. Alright, so here's Josh's possibly complicated question. Do you think adaptations like this are hindered more by their license? They make it too complicated, make them less likely to succeed, since they're restricted to just appendices. They can't actually use anything from the rest of the books or Silmarillion, where if they could use that as a background piece, it would work better. Um, I heard that they can't call someone by their title or something and have to call them something else instead. So, yeah, there's been a couple of moments, and you'll have to forgive me. I haven't like written everything down. I like I said, I just finished episode 6 10 seconds before I turned on the stream, so I haven't like jotted everything down. But sometimes they'll come right up to the edge of something, like somebody's title. I can't remember what that would be, but there was one moment in this episode where I was like, okay, yeah, oh, that's right. It was one of the Valar. Somebody said, like it is believed that one of the Valar watch over the things that grow. But the Valar aren't named in the appendices to the Lord of the Rings that I recall. I mean, they might be, but I don't think that they're individually named until you get to the Valaquenta um, in the Silmarillion. And so, yeah, so they don't name Yavanna. They just mention that there is such a being, but they can't name her. That's what it was. Okay. So but your question is it hindered by oh, yeah, sorry, let me, it's a legal issue to use the correct terminology, so they had to use something else. Yeah, they just didn't name her. So, anyway, do I think adaptations like this are hindered more by their license? The thing is, I don't think there's ever been an adaptation with licensing issues like this. Um, that I can't think of off the top of my head. I can't think of anything else like this. Usually, one of my favorite fantasy books or movies of all time was Stardust, right? And just to use that as a random example, uh, they go buy the rights to Stardust, and they go to Neil Gaiman's publisher and say, "Hey, we want the rights to this book," and so they get the option for the movie, and then they go ahead and make the movie, and they have the source material done. But the Tolkien estate isn't working that way, right? It's the um, the Middle Earth legendarium, so to speak, has been chopped up. It's like, okay, you've got the video game rights and the movie rights, but you have the publishing rights in the US, and that includes the audiobooks and whatnot, but you've got the rights to this, that, and the other. And so anyway, when it came time for Amazon to buy the rights for some ungodly amount of money, um, that what was it, $250 million to buy the rights. It was, as I understand it, not just the appendices. Was it the book and the appendices? I honestly, I can't remember for sure. But regardless, like, I've never heard of anything quite like that in adaptations. So so in this case, is it hindered by their license? Absolutely. It's been kind of rough that way so far. We'll see. We'll see what they're able to do with it, I guess. If I sound tired, by the way, it's only because I am. It's been a long weekend, and we haven't even started the weekend yet. All right, let's see. Oh, interesting. Okay, Jonas says, feel like they could have made this story without using the Lord of the Rings IP, and it would have been fine by attaching the Tolkien title to it. They've set the bar too high to clear. I don't know if they set the bar too high to clear. I think in my extremely expert and well thought out and just uber intelligent point of view. they it's not that it's not that the Lord of the Rings IP is hindering it, or, whatever the bar is. It's that they've imagined what the bar would be for Lord of the Rings IP. Um, they've set their own bar that they may not be able to clear. Again, we'll see. We're 6 episodes into a show that is probably gonna go 5 or more seasons. Okay, so we've got a ways to go. Um, they may yet clear their own bar. But my thought at this point is, that they're trying to jump too high too early, if we wanna, abuse this metaphor for a little while longer. If the So we've set the bar really high, and they're trying to clear it, they're trying to clear that high bar in the first 6 episodes, and it's just, so it's too grand, it's too big, too fast, for this type of medium. For a television show that has many episodes and room to breathe. They're not taking the time to breathe, right? And so you go back. I know I compare it a lot to Game of Thrones, and I'm talking OG Game of Thrones, not House of the Dragon. But my wife and I have been watching the first couple episodes of Game of Thrones, and what's remarkable about Game of Thrones is how small it starts, kind of with the Starks meeting the Lannisters, and the tension there. But it's not, how do I put it? The tension isn't an immediate battle between these two families. It's, little snipes at each other, looks across a room, whatever. In episode 2 of Game of Thrones, that's the King's Road, where, if you haven't watched it, this won't make much sense, but don't worry, I'm not like huge spoilers for the show or something. But Arya Stark, has a fight with Joffrey, and like the two families are kind of like at each other's throats, but in a very small, contained way. There isn't anything like that in the Rings of Power. Um, it's all it's all immediately epic, immediately huge. With the dagger that the kid finds under the floorboards, and the lost king, and the sundering of the elves from the Numenorians, and like all this stuff that is totally fine. It's just they didn't build up to it. They didn't like, okay, again, let's abuse the metaphor. The bar is really high. Train a little bit, like work your way up to it. And they just immediately jumped in and said, "All right, we're gonna try to clear the bar." Well, so I think they've gone too big too fast, and they need some more time to let the story breathe. Um, anyway. All right, where are we? This show is a disaster. It's not a disaster. It's not a disaster. It has its issues, but it is not a disaster. Um, I don't know what that means. The PR department, maybe. Let's see. Let's see. Okay, so I'm just looking through your comments to see what else I want to take on. All right. Ah, yeah, for some reason, I thought they could also use Unfinished Tales or one of the other collections. Nope. No, those are off limits. I wonder how much longer that will last. Christopher Tolkien, who, died, what was it, a couple of years ago, maybe, he was fiercely protective of, um, of his father's work. And for good reason. I mean, why wouldn't he be? I don't think that we should be upset at him for that. But he was protective to the point of, well, let me just put it this way. If Christopher Tolkien had his way, he would never, like, there would never, ever, ever be an adaptation of anything from the Silmarillion. Like, off limits. he kind of recognized, by the time the movies came, or the Peter Jackson movies came around, and they had bought the rights. He recognized that the horse was out of the barn with the Lord of the Rings, and that was out. But he really felt strongly about the Silmarillion, and I'm sure he had his reasons and all that. But I wonder if that will continue to be the case now that he's gone, or if there are other members of the family that will continue continue in Christopher's footsteps, or go a different route, and actually seek to um, get the stories told elsewhere. I don't know. We'll see. But for now, yeah, for now we're in this situation. They can't use Unfinished Tales. They can't use the other collections. Excuse me. Oh man, I feel like I'm going to sneeze. Okay, let's see. Let's see. No, you're not the only one. Everybody talks about this. They're trying to copy every popular theme and motif. Um, yeah, it's if there's one kind of like giant overarching complaint that I have, with regards to this, it's just there does seem to be something of a lack of creativity. Um, or like I said, and this file this one under, hey, they're not telling the story I would tell, which that's always a dangerous road to go down, and I acknowledge that this is just, it's not the story I would tell. But like I was saying earlier, with the idea that they're going too big too fast, I would have started much smaller. And not have to, like they checked off the boxes really quickly, in the first couple of episodes. All of those boxes are checked off. Um, yeah, and that goes down to not just like, I think the Elrond Durin friendship is different enough from Legolas and Gimli that doesn't bother me. That doesn't actually feel like box checking to me. Um, but where was I going to go with this? Where was it? Oh man, my train of thought is, it's off the rails today, you guys. Um, what was I going to say? It's not just about that. Blah blah blah. Who cares? Let's see. Um, All right. This is something okay, so I like the photogenic Ewok. That's pretty funny. Ignoring licensing, Tolkien's writings themselves are is sometimes contradictory, so they have to make decisions that inevitably piss at least some people off. E.g., Sauron repentant or not? So it's one of the things that I love um, from the Silmarillion. I think I brought it up in our final Silmarillion episode. There's a moment where in the final section, chapter, if you will, of the Silmarillion, it's of the Rings of Power in the Third Age. There's a moment when the line is, the Numenorians had forgotten the might of the lords of the West. So when Numenor is overthrown and cast into the sea, and the world is made round, and it like the third, or sorry, of the Rings of Power in the Third Age, that chapter references basically that the Valar are the ones who reshaped the world, and who cast Numenor into the sea. But of course, in the chapter right before that, it was Eru. The Valar couldn't stand against the might of Numenor. Valinor was under siege, and they couldn't they couldn't win. So they said, Eru, please help. So Eru helps. Anyway, but there's that contradiction, which, if we're looking at it through modern tendencies in world building, we'd be like, oh man, that's a continuity error. That's a problem. But in fact, when you have a book of legends, um, myths and legends, then you're allowed to have those things. And in fact, I like it. I think you're encouraged to have those contradictions in the books, in the Silmarillion. it makes it more mythological, more historical to say like, oh yeah, these two sources say something different about why that event occurred or who was responsible for it. But then, yeah, you're right. When you come, so as you say, they have to make decisions that inevitably piss at least some people off. I think that's fair. Yeah, they make decisions about where Galadriel was, what type of person she was, who Elrond is hanging out with, his involvement with Celebrimbor, and that sort of thing. Like they just have to make decisions, and so I kind of talked about this in the last time we talked about Rings of Power on the this live stream, and in our episodes as well. Just that you have your head canon, and you just have to understand that your head canon may not contradict lore, but that doesn't mean that somebody else's different head canon also doesn't contradict lore, right? So yeah, so I think it's fine for them to make decisions like that. Um, Personally, I'd love to see morally gray Sauron. Some of my friends hate the idea. Yeah, it would be weird. I could see it working. Um, I could see it working, but it would be odd, because that's part of of what makes the Lord of the Rings work the way that it does is that you have good versus evil. And it's not that the good guys always make the right choices, right? And it's not like the bad guys are never worthy of pity or respect or whatever, but it is like it's good and it's evil and they fight. So there is something about that purity that is very very Tolkien. So it would be odd to see Sauron being morally gray, but like I said, I could see it working. Let's see. Oh, interesting. I mentioned in the Discord, my issues with reconciling with the books isn't the details or timeline, it's that it all just feels so small. And I see, I guess I just spent, 15 minutes talking about this a little earlier, but I feel exactly the opposite. I feel like it's too big. Um, that the stories aren't personal enough. We get hints at, personal stories, but like I don't really understand what's going on with Isildur. In this latest episode, they're off to Middle Earth and he's on the ship and he's talking to Galadriel and she's like, "What do you want?" And he's like, "I just wanted to escape. I wanted to get out of that place, out of Numenor." And it's like, "Oh, so that was his motivation that whole time?" Like that was very unclear for 5 episodes. And so what I'm getting at is I feel like it's too big where we're not taking time to let individual characters and relationships breathe, have the conversations. Um, where the conversations that they have are so quick and so um plot driving that I feel like I'm not getting a chance to get to know the characters, um with some exceptions, but as an overall rule. Yeah. Let's see. How would you compare this to the Watt adaptation, Wheel of Time? Amazon now has two of the biggest IPs in fantasy, but they kind of whiffed on Wheel of Time, in my opinion. Seem to be on the same path with Rings of Power. Um, I will say it's tough for me to know for sure because I value both properties so highly, and Um, I'm much more of a don't tell Corey Olsen I said this, but expert. Like, okay, I'm not the Tolkien professor, but but I'm much more of an expert in the Lord of the Rings than I am in the Wheel of Time. But I know the Wheel of Time pretty well, enough that you know that I saw all the changes that they made in season one. I sorry, I'm getting off track, but my point is just let's see, how do I compare it? I do think that I'm enjoying the Rings of Power a little bit more, possibly because I'm just such a Tolkien guy, but also possibly because I think that there's been a little bit more care in um, the design of the world. And now I'm gonna say that I'm saying that gently, in part because I think that the Wheel of Time show actually looks great for the most part. I the costume design, the sets, like everything, it looks great. But Rings of Power, the design on Rings of Power takes it up another notch. I think it looks fantastic. They both stumble in actual storytelling. Um, and we can talk a little bit more about that with Rings of Power, especially. Um, and I, the writing, like the actual line writing, isn't awesome in either one. But I do think it's slightly better in Rings of Power. Um, there were some pretty cringy moments in Wheel of Time with the writing, and there with Rings of Power, I roll my eyes at the writing sometimes, but I don't as often cringe. Does that make sense? So it's like it sounds like I'm crapping on the Wheel of Time. I'm not. It's just like if the Rings of Power is very good, then Wheel of Time is a little bit less very good. How's that? Okay. I've got, oh my gosh. Ooh, interesting. Is Celebrimbor playing Gilgalad and Elrond against each other? Is he working with Anatar right now? Oh, I don't think so. But that would be interesting. But I doubt it. I doubt it. But that's a good thought. Uh, uh, uh. So okay, let me take this from Mac Scarfield. That's quite a name. I like that. My major gripe has been Galadriel's character as a loner, as she should be a charismatic leader, even at her most headstrong. Um, episode 5 and 6 was a major improvement for me there. Yeah, well, and I think that's fair. I would just point out that like the way the story has worked, um, she is commander of the Northern armies. She is, a charismatic leader. We just like the story kind of picked up where that started to fall apart for her, and she's spent a few episodes basically gathering a new army in Numenor, right? Like so she is that. Now, the reason I wanted to actually pull this one up on screen is your use of the word should. And I just want to say be careful. Be careful of that word should when you're talking about media criticism, especially with something like this that is so open for interpretation. Uh, when we're talking about the Lord of the Rings appendices, there's not a lot of meat on those bones, right? It's mostly bones. And so when we get into should, it's and I did the exact same thing not 10 minutes ago, right? I feel like they should have started smaller, right? So I fall into this trap as well. I'm not saying I'm great at it, but it's a lesson for all of us. I guess seeing the word should triggered my brain more than maybe me using the word should did a few minutes ago. But it's the headcanon thing. You have your headcanon of how Galadriel should be. That's totally fine. But then to say the show should follow my headcanon, that's where we get into trouble. So, um, okay, this could be interesting. In episode 6, they lost me with the logistics and time logic. I don't buy that all horses would fit in 3 mid-sized ships. They seem to sail back in time since they saw the sunrise long before they arrived. Well, yeah, and it was unclear logistics, but I just assumed that they were telling the Numenor story a few days in advance, so but they could have been a little neater with that storytelling. I agree with that. Um, we keep away from episode 6 so far. Oh, is this are we talking about spoilers? Yeah, I'm trying not to get too spoilery. Let's see. Oh, this could be interesting. I hope Halbrand will turn out to be the undead Oathbreaker king, and Sauron will be in his fair form at Celebrimbor's forge, unbeknownst to Elrond. Oh, yeah. Make me show conspiracy. Nice. I like the Halbrand thing. That's interesting. I isn't the is that king named? I mean, I know a lot about the Lord of the Rings, but I can't remember that off the top of my head. The king under the mountain. Oh, well, that's the dwarves. Sorry, the king under the dead. What is it? What are they? You guys, my brain is shot. What's the name of the road? Regardless, yeah. The Oathbreaker King. I think that could be really interesting. I like that. Okay. Let's see. Um, I am go get my patchy coat. Become our expert. So I don't have my Professor Craig coat here. And by the way, I don't know if you guys, if you follow me on Twitter, you might have seen this, but I've weirdly gotten a bunch of comments because that Silmarillion video, it's how to read the Silmarillion for the first time, and I just give a couple of tips of how to get in the right mindset for the Silmarillion, and that video has been taking off ever since the show started, or like right before the show started, which makes a lot of sense, and so I assume it'll continue to do well for a few more weeks while the show is going, and then it'll drop off again. But because of that popularity of that video, I'm getting a lot of comments in there now about my appearance, which it's new for me. So one of my friends, she's down in San Diego, and she's got a YouTube channel with like 50,000 followers or so, um, and she gets comments on the way she looks all the time, and it's one of those unfortunate realities of life, the internet, and everything, right? She's an attractive woman on YouTube, and so she gets comments on her appearance, not always nice ones. Um, but she has to deal with that, and I'm like, well, thank goodness I'm like the most average looking guy ever, because I'm a guy and I'm super average looking. I won't ever have to worry about that. And now there are people in there critiquing my wardrobe. So, like, your jacket sucks. Everything you wear is too heavy. I hate your tie. It's all this stuff, and I'm like, man, is this what it feels like? It's so weird. It is the most odd thing that people like that somebody took the time to type out, like, I hate your tie. It doesn't go with the rest of your clothes. It looks ancient. This is stupid. Like, you're stupid. What the heck is going on? So odd. Oh boy. Um. Oh boy. All right. Ugh. I noticed a particular image flashing beside you on screen. Are we up for a rant? Should we rant? Should we rant? Thanks, Todd. I appreciate that. That means a lot. uh, wear more layers and a scarf. That's what I. Yeah, thanks. Everybody, come at me with the fashion advice now. Thanks, everybody. Okay, we should rant. We should rant a little bit. All right. I understand that when it comes to an image like this one, that there are licensing issues at play. So I get that the writers over at Amazon Studios, whatever it's called, that they have limitations, restrictions. They're working around those. I'm sure they are doing the best that they can. However, I have been very willing to excuse a lot of little things, timeline compression and shifts in the lore, um, but little things, like where the Harfoots are, and like the timeline around them, and a lot of timeline stuff, and I'm like, okay, that's all right. But then we got to episode 5, and I have to admit, I finished episode 5 and was a little disgusted. Is that the right word? Miffed? Um, just upset. I just whatever the correct strength of the word upset is, that's what I was. Um, it's not that there's some tiny adjustment to the lore, it's a complete revamping of the way Middle-earth works. What happened to the Silmarils, and how elves and their immortality function. Um, okay, so let's back up. What we're yeah, this one. Okay, that way. What we're looking at here, it's in episode 5. You recall if you watched it that there's the legend of the lost Silmaril, and it's what it was placed in a tree, or a tree grew around it, or something, whatever. And it's the tree on it's on the mountain above Moria. It has a name, Caradhras, and there are two others. I can't remember their names. Um, but that's it's on this mountain, and there's a Silmaril in it. And then an elf lord and a Balrog are fighting over the tree, and then lightning comes and strikes the tree and changes the Silmaril, the precious jewel of the first age, right? There are 3 Silmarils, and this is one of the Silmarils, and the lightning strike changed it into Mithril and drove it into the depths of the mountain, and now the dwarves are finding it. First of all, that is dumb. That's really bad. It's that is, just and I should let me back up and say, from an actual lore perspective, it's really bad. Just because the Silmarils, it would be a bit like changing the history of the One Ring. In the Lord of the Rings, Frodo doesn't actually carry the One Ring. He only got it to Rivendell, and then they gave it to Legolas, and Legolas took it the rest of the way, and then handed it off to Faramir, who climbed over the mountains of shadow and dropped it in the fire. Like, that's the kind of change we're talking about when we're talking about the Silmarils. So for those who don't know, the 3 Silmarils, one of them is the one recovered by Beren and Luthien on their adventure, eventually is in the hands of their grandson, um, uh, Arendelle the Mariner, who goes to Valinor, sues for pardon and aid, and he's then placed in the sky as the Morning Star. So that's the first Silmaril, and that so it's in the sky as a star. The other 2 are recovered after Morgoth is defeated, by the Vanyar and, Maedhros and Maglor? Whatever. Two of the sons of Fëanor steal the Silmarils back, because they're under their oath. And then they can't stand the touch of them, and so one of the Silmarils gets cast into the sea. One is dropped into a fiery chasm. So they're both lost forever. Um, so anyway, that's the actual myth of where the Silmarils went. And so does that make sense? Like, this whole tree thing, uh, it's not just like, oh, we're gonna tweak what happened to one of them. It's like it's just completely rewriting the history of Middle Earth, right? So that hurt to watch. That was very, very painful for me to watch. And then it turns out, sorry, like, I'm only laughing so to keep from crying. Then it turns out that the elves are after Mithril because it's the essence of one of those Silmarils, and without it, like, without enough of it, their light will diminish, like the light of the Eldar will diminish, and they don't exactly say what that means. Again, they could rewrite everything, right? But what that means in lore terms, we talk about that with Luthien and with Arwen, where their light diminishes and they become mortal, right? So they're no longer counted among the elves, among the Eldar. They no longer have the light of the Eldar. They become mortal humans, um, and the idea I'm trying to keep from ranting too hard, okay? Like, okay. But the idea that the light of the Eldar, that the immortality of the elves as a race, I'm not talking about an individual like Luthien, right? But that the entire race of the elves depends on the mineral essence of one of the three Silmarils that was crafted by an elf thousands and thousands and thousands of years after their creation and awakening at Lake Cuiviénen. Um, it's it's bizarre and kind of offensive lore wise. Um, so I'm having issues with that. Now, I'm trying to contain myself and understand that they may they may be doing like a little fake out, and they're zigging this way and then they'll zag back the other way, and it won't end up being that way. Maybe Gil Galad is manipulating the situation by lying about the need for mithril. It's something, who knows. They could do something else with it, but as currently presented, mega yikes, huge yikes, all the yikes. Like, what the biggest yike you've ever seen, there's a whole crowd of them. So, um, I am, like I said, having some trouble with that one. Uh, so again, I could rant harder. I'm trying not to, partly because I'm not in my house right now. I'm in elsewhere right now. So I'm trying not to yell into my microphone. But that I was actually really nervous to watch this week's episode because I was so miffed by that storyline that I was like, what's going to happen this week? Am I like, is it going to hurt too much? And luckily, we didn't do. I'm just going to call it the Mithril storyline. None of that, right? It was all Southlands, the Numenorians and the orcs and the humans there in Mordor, future Mordor. Or I guess, well, if you've seen this episode, this is the beginning of Mordor. This is the birth of Mordor. So that was pretty cool. Anyway, all right. That's my lore rant. We'll see what they do with it. It's not like I'm going to stop watching the show, but it is definitely making me a little bit nervous these days. How's that? There you go. There it is. So, what is it? So the Numenorians could have gotten out of their oaths by striking the Silmarils with lightning. Like, it's. I guess I'm not done. I guess I'm not done. The idea that lightning would do that to a Silmaril is kind of dumb to me. To me. To me. Okay, it's again personal opinions, etc., etc. Oh boy. Okay. Let's see. Correct me if I'm wrong. Comwell was an Easterling, but there are many unknown Nazgul that Halbrand also could be. Yeah, yeah, I'm not going to correct you on that. Um, I am rusty on my Ringwraith lore, so I won't be correcting you. I'm just glad you're here for that. Okay, so there's a theory Oh, wait, okay, hang on. Okay, so maybe these are kinda tied together. Is it possible that this is being presented as an in-world flawed interpretation of events? Yes, it is, absolutely, and I hope that that's the case. There's a theory that the show is deliberately misleading us, that the elves are actually being lied to by Onatar. That would okay, I would, all would be forgiven, okay? So so again, like I was saying earlier, this is as presented at this moment. If they are successfully able to make it, like, hey, Sauron didn't just mess with the elves, he messed with you, dear viewer. Shouldn't you, aren't you mad at Sauron? I'll be like, yeah, I am. Go get him. Like, great. Okay, that would be great. Um, we will see. That's because it's got to be something like that. Because if it, all right, yeah. Okay. A lie by Anatar for some sweet, sweet mithril for his rings. Interesting. All right. Okay. Just let the rant out. No, I can't. I can't right now. Um, I do. I do. You guys, it's I've if you listen to early episodes of the podcast, I tended to get a little bit more animated about things. Um, and we've been going for almost 9 years now. And so, part of it is just age. Like I've just mellowed out a little bit, and it's we all do, or we all should. I think there's that word again, should. But we all tend to mellow out as we age, and I'm no exception to that. I've just kind of learned to like not get so worked up about stuff. But sometimes it's hard. Sometimes it is hard. Uh, let's see. I've heard the theories that Anatar is already influencing them behind the scenes, and that will be great. The show should nudge us on this direction, not knowing lore beforehand. Okay. Um. Okay. So, all right. Let's. But it's not just about the lore, right? So, one question would be how well are they telling the story outside of just the lore perspective, okay? Because that is it's malleable, it's subjective. I mean, it's all subjective, isn't it? Right? There is no, or I shouldn't say no, there's very little objectivity to be had in discussing something like this. So that's all fine. Um, but just from a storyteller's perspective, I often try to put myself in the shoes of my wife, who is not a huge, fantasy reader. She's not a big fan of all this stuff, but she likes some of these shows sometimes, and so we watched Game of Thrones together. We're watching House of the Dragon, and she's been watching this with me. But she has not kept up. I think she has watched maybe 3 episodes so far, and you know, if you ask her about it, she'll say, "Oh yeah, it's fine. It's fine. Yeah, I like this about it, and I don't like this about it. Whatever. It's fine. It's just not like it's not really pulling her in." And so, anyway, my point just being, I try to put myself in her shoes to consider, like, all right, so how would this play for somebody who isn't a huge nerd with all the Lord of the Rings stuff like I am? You know, is it still a good story being told? And for the most part, excuse me, for the most part, I think it's fine, it's okay. Um, there are some good things about it. I actually think that they're doing a good job with the Numenor storyline. Again, for the most part, with some exceptions, but they're doing a good job with the Numenor storyline. But then you get to the Elrond Durin storyline, and it's getting messy. I guess we'll just call it the Mithril storyline. The Mithril storyline is it's not great, which is too bad because it's got like 3, maybe 4 of the strongest characters on the show. Elrond, Durin, Gilgalad, um, and Misa. Is it Disa? Disa, right? The wife. She's great. I'm really enjoying her so far. Um, so it's got these strong characters, or at least, their screen presence is strong, even if we don't know all that much about them as much as I feel like we should in some ways. Um, but, uh, what was I gonna say? Oh, yeah, the storytelling. So going back to this thing, that issue, the Mithril storyline, I was I was kind of, cocking my head like, "What? Hang on, wait, what?" Because it came out of nowhere. Like, "Oh, there's Mithril," and then, like, we didn't know there was Mithril here, and Elrond is in the dark, and it seemed like Gil-galad was in the dark. Maybe he wasn't, but it just seemed like this isn't a thing. It's not a thing. We're gonna set up the making of the Rings of Power with Celebrimbor, and we need the dwarves to help us build this tower. Forget all that stuff. Mithril um, is now the end all be all of this storyline, and it's like, okay, we're gonna build up all this stuff going on with the relationship, like between the two characters and between the elves and dwarves generally, and we're gonna build the tower, and Elrond and Celebrimbor are going to start getting into ring lore and all this stuff. And then so they're building all this stuff up, and then they're just like, "Ooh, squirrel!" Boom, way off. And so it really took me by surprise. And I have to imagine that with somebody like my wife, if she was watching it, she'd be like, "Wait, what? Um, what? Where did that come from?" And again, we can have all these theories like, "Oh, Sauron is behind the scenes and he's manipulating all these parties." That's fine. But we know kind of roughly where Sauron is supposed to be. Not everybody does. Most people don't. Most people who are watching the show don't know where he's supposed to be. They don't they kind of they know that Galadriel thinks he's still alive and she's trying to hunt him, but like that's it. They don't know that he's going to be part of the ring making. And so from that perspective, from the perspective of somebody who's not steeped in the lore, that particular idea of Sauron manipulating behind the scenes, it just doesn't hold any weight because it's literally non-existent unless you know the lore. Um, and so I feel like that storyline is really falling down, which means that I was very relieved. I was highly relieved. I was happy to see no Mithril storyline in episode 6 because I was so thrown off by all that stuff, obviously in more ways than one, that I couldn't have been happier that we just left it behind for an episode. Well, I doubt we'll leave it behind for 2 episodes, so yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens next time. Okay. I want this one. David Bowie is considered to play Elrond in an early adaptation attempt. That'd be glorious to watch. Yeah, can you imagine? Like basically his character from Labyrinth. Um, what do they call him? The something king? I can't remember. It's Labyrinth is one of those ones. Like if you watched it at the right age, then you loved it, and I didn't, and so I don't. Uh, big thumbs down on Labyrinth from me. But if you love it, I'm not saying you shouldn't love it. I'm just saying, yikes, yikes. Um, his part in the ring making was in the movies. Okay, fine. But it's not in the show. Um, was it? Yeah. Yeah, you know who wasn't in the movies was Celebrimbor. They kind of in the movie version, in that prologue, the implication is that Sauron made all the rings, which and then gifted them to men, elves, and dwarves, which is not how it went down, of course. But so yeah, I don't think we can count on the movies there. Uh, but that is a good point. All right. Is it that's right, he is the Goblin King. Can it be in the show if it's in the movies? I don't know. I'm not that granular with following the, licensing issues. So, um, let's see what else we got. I know C's in Tolkien are supposed to be hard, but it's oh, C's. Oh, so you say Celebrimbor? Yeah, I can't. I when I first read the book, um, back in so the movie came out December 2001. It was Fellowship of the Ring, so I would have I would have read The Lord of the Rings in its entirety by, like, January 2002. Um, I had a hard time with that as well. Um, like, I read it, I'd seen the movie once or twice up to that point, but I don't if they say Celebrimbor, I think they do say it once or twice, but, like, you don't remember. So I'm reading the book and doing the same thing, giving soft C's to everything, and then I get to the end of the book and kept reading. I went through the appendices. Even the first time I ever read it, I was captivated by the whole thing. Hence where I am 20 some odd years later, 21 years later. Um, so I was captivated by the whole thing and actually read every dang word of those appendices and got to the pronunciation guide and got to the C's, and I was like, "Oh, no." And it messed with me for, like, a year. Um, so, then I'd go back and reread it and accidentally put a soft C in just in my head. Um, and then, "Oh, okay, no, I gotta do it. It's a hard C. Okay, alright," it messed me up for a while. Uh, let's see. Did you see the Ralph, is it Ralph Bakshi, I think? I've seen bits and pieces, but I've never actually sat down and watched the entire thing. But I think they just released the Blu-ray. Is that right? Let's let's check. I wanna say there's a Blu-ray now. Bakshi, Lord of the Rings. Um, oh, I saw some ad for it somewhere, and I thought it was on Blu-ray. I don't know if oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Lord of the Rings animated 1978 anime. Oh my gosh, yeah, there's a Blu-ray and it's expensive. Jeez. Yeesh. So if anybody has a line on a Blu-ray, the Ralph Bakshi version, let me know. That'd be great. All right, you guys. I've been talking for a while. I feel proud of myself for not ranting as hard as I could have, and as many of you probably would say should have. That I should have ranted harder. But all in all, I will say this. Here's my parting thought, and then we'll close up shop for the day. Episode 5 was rough for me. The show may redeem it. I am absolutely open to that possibility, but episode 5 was very difficult. Um, episode 6 did a lot. It did a lot to repair that damage, partly by staying away from that storyline, but also partly because I do think that the episode the storylines dealt with in episode 6 are the strongest ones so far. So I am still in. I mean, I'm gonna watch the show. Like I'll watch the show, but at some point they may make some decision that just has me like emotionally at least jumping off the train and saying no, this is like it's bad. But I am not there. I still think yeah, it's worthwhile. It's fun. It's fun to see these locations and characters and all that stuff, and I'm still having a good time with it. But they haven't by that same token, they haven't yet sold me on, "Okay, this is awesome." Like, there's still work to do there, if that makes sense. So, um, let's see, hopefully you will too. I mean, I've seen episode 6 now. Or maybe you're talking to the rest of the chat, but yeah, it's so far oh, you're talking to Todd. Yeah, so far so good. It's could be better, could be a lot worse. A lot worse. So, anybody who's seen the Shannara Chronicles on MTV/Spike, was it? Knows that could be a lot worse. So, um People are still releasing Blu-rays, absolutely, and people should still be buying them, based on what's happening over at HBO Max, taking a bunch of titles off of their service. You never know. You never know when rights holders are just gonna say, "Nope, no more streaming." So, and that can happen, by the way, with movies that you buy. Like, if you go on Amazon or you go on, Vudu or whatever, and you purchase for 20 bucks the streaming title, in the fine print, it says, "Yeah, we can revoke your license to watch this at any time," meaning they take it away from you. So people are still releasing Blu-rays and people are still buying them, and if you have one, you should hang on to it if you love it. So, all right. I'm gonna run, everybody. Thanks so much for hanging out. I will not be here next week. I'm gonna be in Denver with yeah, I'll be in Colorado at least with Drew McCaffrey from Inking Out Loud. We're gonna hang out for the weekend. So as far as I know, there won't be a live stream. Maybe I can pop in and do something, but don't plan on it. So I will plan on seeing you in 2 weeks. Um, let's see, what's the Monday episode is a new Author's Shelf episode with we had Shannon McGuire come by and we read The Last Unicorn by Peter S. Beagle. So another 70s classic. Speaking of Ralph Bakshi's Lord of the Rings, The Last Unicorn, a 70s classic. So we read that and discussed it with Shannon McGuire. And so that should be coming out on Monday. Look for that. Anyway, yeah, and thanks for popping in for this one. Appreciate you guys, giving me, uh, you know, comments to respond to. Makes my job easier, and hopefully makes it fun for you. Anyway, see you guys in a couple weeks.